And we're in, and welcome, well, thrice welcome, let's go for four. Welcome to a lovely person called Emma Brown, who is from Denim Star UK. And this is a special new strand of the Good Listening To podcast, which is called the Brand Strand. Well, what I'm doing is inviting my guests to the same place, the Clearing, but we're here to hear your story and amplify your brand. So it's my great pleasure to welcome a lovely person who I've been, I suppose, flirting with in the right way for several months to get us to the point of coming to the Clearing. So this is Emma Brown, Denim Star UK. So good morning, Emma.
Good morning to you as well, Chris. How are you?
I am outstanding in my field, like a good farmer. You can always tell a good farmer he's outstanding. Yes, the jokes will not get any better. So yes,
I love it. Brilliant.
By the way, I googled you before we started because I can, and
the modern world, yeah.
And it said buy Emma Brown on Amazon. So I thought, how much is she going for? So that's the first hit.
So, interesting. I don't know how I've ended up on Amazon.
I'm sure you're not sort of selling yourself lock, stock and barrel, but I'm assuming it's about the fact that you run Denim Star UK. So just tell me about Denim Star UK, first of all.
Right, yes. So Denim Star UK, it's a women's sustainable hosiery brand, which is denim coloured socks to style your denims. So it's actually very simple in a nutshell.
So it's not just the complete maelstrom of denim fashion accessories, it's specifically the socks. It's eco socks, isn't it?
It's eco socks, yes. So I'm making sure that I'm using sustainable cotton, which means it's basically dyed with no carcinogenic dyes.
Yeah.
It's not obviously fed with any horrible chemicals or anything.
Yeah.
And it also looks after the people who are farming it, as well as the ones who are working with it in the supply chain as well.
Lovely. So you overseeing obviously your own supply chain in this, and you've spent time sort of globally sourcing where to get your denim cotton from.
Yes. So I'm working with two lovely developers, and we've chosen a supplier in Italy. So we've tried to keep it as close to home as possible, because also the thing about the brand is, from another sustainable point of view, I've tried to be very clever with it from the design stage as well, in that it only uses one colour yarn. So that completely cuts down on waste as well.
Yeah.
But of course, people like to have points of difference and interest. So within that collection of socks, I have all these lovely different knitted patterns within it. But for that capability to knit it at the moment, but never say never, we don't have suppliers in the UK that have the capability to knit the level of patterns I need. Hence, that's why we've gone to Italy. But it's still keeping it as close to British soil as possible.
And you said never say never a few moments ago, and that means you've gone all James Bond on your socks as well, which is lovely. And also, I definitely heard that you accessorise. So if I'm going to buy, is it mostly for women or men, or is it unisex?
Well, at the moment, it's only for women, but as soon as I can really get my feet on the ground, get more lessons learned.
See what you did there, socks, feet on the ground.
Then I will definitely bring it in for men and kids as well, because I've been so lucky that I've had so many gentlemen say, you know what, I want to wear these as well. So don't forget us. And absolutely, I'm not going to forget the men as well.
And your design really comes into its own then in how you accessorise in terms of the Emma Brown sort of signature patterns, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, well, I look at all sorts of areas for inspiration, but definitely, I guess, going back from my Central St. Martin's days, I was always interested in the likes of the Bloomsbury set, Vanessa Bell, William Morris. So when I'm working on my own patterns, I guess it goes that sort of direction. So it has this quintessentially British twist to it. But also I've been deviating here a little bit, but I've just been so lucky in my career that I've traveled the world and I've worked in all sorts of places. I've worked with all sorts of cultures, and something that we all have in common is we all have our go-to denims.
We
We all
do.
have our go-to jeans, and that was when, when I was thinking about how can I start small, because I've always wanted to have a brand. How can I control the sustainability side? How can I produce something that's going to give me, a greater ability to try and sell across the globe? And that's when I came up with Denim Coloured Socks to style your denim. So keeping it actually really very simple.
And I love the simplicity of that. And you had me at socks because my favourite all-time kids book is called Fox in Socks and Other Stories. Socks,
Oh,
fox, box, knocks, anything that rhymes with socks, you had me. And also the iconic nature of denim. When I was thinking about interviewing you, I remember as in my childhood, I might be aging myself slightly, but the idea of Marlborough Man being the all-American denim on horseback, that's my favourite, that's my iconic first reference of denim. And then I have memories of going into a shop, and not to buy denim socks specifically, which is a lovely, interesting thrust of your own sort of idiosyncratic quirk of it. I remember going into shops, and this was in Southend on Sea in my teens, and then them giving me the choice: do you want flares or straight? And I remember going, flares, please. What was I thinking about?
I love it. And that's the wonderful thing about my socks. And I actually have a podcast as well,
Ooh,
which is called Socks and Sandals and Other Scandals. So it's creating the Denim Star community.
fox in socks and fox in socks in sandals and other scandals. I love all of that. That's great. Get you to your podcast.
So what I'm going to start doing on there more is Emma's hosiery highlights. And yeah,
Tosery,
so
did you say?
sorry,
Tosery? Did you say tosery or hosiery?
hosiery.
Sorry, I'm becoming feet obsessed talking to you. That's fine.
actually actually, on a funny note, you have to be careful when you're googling inspiration for socks and things, because there is some bizarre things out there as well.
Well, to that end, actually, I also saw that one of your products was called man-child baby wear. And when I thought, oh gosh, I wonder what that is, because, and I was slightly nervous, just comically, I suppose I'd say I was slightly nervous of Googling that, in the sense that there's a sort of fetish to do with men where we really mustn't talk about that. And it's not one that I have, obviously. Anyway, moving on. A short while ago, a few paragraphs ago, you used a wonderful key word that I'd like to hook, which is inspiration. So what we want to find out now is the story behind the story of Emma Brown and where you go to get your inspiration. So enter the storytelling construct of the Good Listening To podcast special brand Strand episode. Let me bring you into the clearing, as I do for all my guests. So Emma Brown, into a clearing. What is a clearing like for you? Where do you go, metaphorically or literally, to get clutter-free, inspirational and able to think?
That's such a good question, because I actually have many places. So quite often it depends on mood. But I will go with one of my favorite ones. I'm very lucky that my husband's Mexican, and he's taken me on many great trips to Mexico. So one of my clearings that I like to go to that stays in my mind is a place called Palenque. And it's in the south of Mexico, and it's actually this settlement of Mayan temples.
Oh,
And it really gives you goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now, actually. And so it's in this jungle, and as you drive into it, there is this clearing where they obviously remove the trees, but I think obviously later day, now that they've been restoring it, they've probably had to do a bit more. However, you get the picture that the Mayans removed this area of trees and they built these beautiful temples that they've restored as much as they can now, today, present day.
yeah.
And I just remember that when we climbed to the top of one of these temples that you were allowed to go to the top of, I just remember looking out on this clearing, and then you've got this huge jungle of trees surrounding you and listening to growler monkeys.
Gosh, Emma, that is one of the most profound, iconic, happy places that I've heard yet described in the history of this podcast. That is just awesome.
Oh, wow.
So did you
Oh,
say Palenque?
Palenque. That's the name. So hey, come to Mexico and we'll show you around.
And there's a lovely adage in comedy improvisation that I work in the realm of, which is if you can't top it, stop it. So please don't tell us about any more of your wonderful iconic clearings, because that is untoppably awesome. And you mentioned a clearing as well, where they've cleared away the trees. So if I now may bring a tree back into your beautiful Palenque clearing, you can decide whether you're atop the temple or within the clearing. And we're going to bring a tree into your clearing now, where we're going to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out. And as you know, this is the commencement of the part where I'm going to ask you about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you, Emma, that we couldn't know about you until you tell us. So this is your tree to shake. Go where you like within the construct of it. This is the exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Over to you within Palenque. What a beautiful clearing to commence your story. Off you go.
Oh, lovely. I love this tree concept that you create, because I want to hug the tree as well. I'm definitely a tree hugger. So 4 things that have shaped me. You do hear people quite often referring to people, and it is people and situations that have definitely shaped me and helped me to bring it into the brand as well. The first one I will begin with is my lovely nanny Violet.
Oh, what a beautiful
Oh,
nanny's name.
what a lovely name, who's obviously not with us anymore. She passed away when I was a teenager. But we are a very modest family. And I remember in the holidays, we would go on the bus. We'd be living in Buckinghamshire at this point, because my parents decided to do the thing of move us out of London into the country. So I remember going back into London on the bus, going to see Nanny, who lived in Cricklewood. So very, very, very down to earth, and used to go to Brent Cross. And that used to be the highlight, go for tea and cake. But my most fondest memory would be sitting in her lounge. And as always, she'd have the knitting needles, knitting away. And I was just always so inspired by that. And then she taught me to hand knit. So that's where knitwear first came from.
From your grandmother Violet. I love that. Also, my heart is singing because I too used to live in Cricklewood when I was at the Central School of Speech and Drama. I lived in a road called Ash Grove in Cricklewood as my student pad, which is just off the Kilburn High Road and Cricklewood High Street. And in fact, I used to be a barman. I used to be a barman at the Hog's Grunt, which was a pub complex that was just round the corner, if you remember, in Cricklewood.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Production Village.
I can't remember the bars, but I do obviously remember sort of in between the bus getting to the flat where Nanny was, and then when we'd go to Brent Cross and kind of the sort of high street. Because I'd have to really think back.
Just beyond the railway bridge, as you turn right off Cricklewood High Street, is there a place called Production Village, which used to be the Samuelson film lot. Anyway, la-di-blah. Sorry to go. You just made my heart sing because I think
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Isn't that funny? Who knows? I might have even walked past you as a little kid with my mum. You never know.
5 degrees of separation. It's a small old world, but I definitely wouldn't want to hoover it, as they say.
Yeah.
So back to your knitwear. Getting going with Violet is the first.
Yay!
That
Absolutely. So yeah, Nanny started me off with that, and then it would have to be studying at Central St Martin's. So eventually I decided I wanted to specialize in knitwear, and I got into St Martin's with that in mind and to do that. And I have a little bit of a funny story about that. Obviously, when you're younger, you're a bit more cocky and things, aren't you? You don't really appreciate what you're saying and things. And I remember when I was trying to decide which university to get into, and I was discussing it with my brother, and we were actually listening to Jarvis Cocker's I Want to Be Like Common People on the radio.
Yeah.
And it came up about St Martin's College, and my brother then started saying to me, oh, right, okay, yeah, you're trying to work out which university to go to. do you know St. Martin's? I said, nope. He said, okay, so you want to do a fashion degree and you don't know Central St. Martin's, being my typical brother. And I was like, no. He said, okay, I need to teach you about this. So then when he did, I just replied, oh, okay, I'll go there then. That was my response.
You know what's so lovely? There is a lovely adage, which is what's meant for you won't pass you by. And the Jarvis Cocker song, chiming St. Martin's, and the conversation you had with your brother, a bit like your grandmother Violet teaching you knitwear. There's two wonderful sort of moments of what's meant for you won't pass you by there.
I just got goosebumps again. I love that. That's wonderful. So I worked very hard to get in there. I got my portfolio together. You had people saying, oh, no, you won't get in there. It's so hard, obviously, because, older people knowing what it's about and things. And I just kept staying really focused. No, this is what I want to do. And going to the interview, did my thing, shared that story that I just shared with you when they said, so how did you hear about us? You can imagine these two very strong-willed ladies, dressed all in black as usual with red lipstick, and they just look at each other quietly and then look back at me, and it's like, I've got to say something I shouldn't have said again, but it's like, okay, I've done it, let's see. And what was amazing, I ended up with an unconditional offer, which was
what's
amazing.
So lovely, by the way, is the fact that you weren't going in there with any any airs and graces. You were just completely an authentic, humble human being, which, by the way, has lovely resonances. I don't know if you saw the film about Barbara Windsor's life. There's a really beautiful drama where she got into, she started working with a very famous theatre director called Joan Littlewood, because when she turned up for her audition, Joan Littlewood was apparently just sweeping the yard outside. And so Babs Windsor spoke to her as if she was a cleaner at the venue. But they had the most authentic conversation where you weren't in awe of the fact you're going, now meeting somebody who you then put on a pedestal who has attributed charisma. So the less you know about something sometimes, the more authentic you can be. So that doesn't surprise me that you telling that lovely story, if you did, about Jarvis Cocker and your granny, Violet, got you into St. Martin's. How lovely.
Definitely. And, that's how I've always tried to be, is just be modest, because that's who I am. I come from a really modest background. And like you say, sometimes naivety is a bit of a blessing, because I am a bit of a worrywart, actually. I overthink things and I worry terribly. So I've kind of learned, how do I do things? I will go in and do it. I will get to a certain level. Then when I get to a stage, I know I need to know more about it. Then I'll look into it more heavily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you'll trust your instincts to get as far as you can. And I love that. There's a bravery attached to that. And there's that other quote, which is be yourself, because everyone else is taken. So, we've only got our lens on this world. So why don't we say yes and then work it out later, which is another quote you can think about.
Definitely. And then thirdly, what's definitely shaped me, my lovely mum, who was an absolute sweet soul and not a mean bone in her body, used to really heavily suffer with depression. And so with my dad, we always did what we could to care for her. And she actually had a really good self-coping mechanism. So she would have times when she's completely fine. And then the times when she needed more support, she always had Dad and I. So that definitely really shaped me as well, made me a major empath. It taught me, to think for others, not to dwell on yourself too much, but also what that really shaped me to do as well was that Mum was such an amazing character that sometimes, no matter what you told her, it just didn't go in. And, you just had to appreciate that something she was going through. It's not that she didn't want to listen. That it taught me that you've really got to believe in yourself. That has to come from you. So I learned that from a very early age.
So I'm hearing that you learnt to be autonomous, but also deeply empathic through the experience of your mum and her depression.
I need to write that down. That's amazing.
Luckily,
you've articulated that beautifully.
Luckily, we're recording, so you can. That's good.
Absolutely.
And you used the story you've just been telling about your mum in the past tense. Can we assume that she's not here anymore? Or
Yes, sadly, she passed away in 2008.
right, sure thing.
Yeah, so it's been a long time now. And actually, that will come to one of my thoughts a bit later, actually, 3 things that inspire you. So it will kind of overlap a little bit. But towards the end of her life, she fell with an illness called Guillain-Barré syndrome, if you've ever heard of that.
No, I have Guillain-Barré.
Guillain-Barré, and what it is your immune system attacks itself
Oh, okay.
and you almost become catatonic, but you are completely aware. You can't blink, speak, can't move your body. It's the most cruelest thing that well, there's many cruel things that happen in our world, but this is another one, to watch a loved one go through that.
And
Whereas
do we experience it as what's called locked in syndrome? Is that the same thing or different?
It's different. It's different. That, I mean, I'm no doctor or anything, but my understanding is that it's definitely different. That someone who's going through this, they're still completely aware what's going on. It is just that because the immune system attacks itself, it attacks the muscles.
Yeah.
So to be able to operate your voice box, it attacks those muscles. So you can't operate your voice box. So it literally paralyzes your body effectively. Mm-hmm. And so she was in hospital for 8 months with this. And so overlapping a little bit with 3 things that inspire you, totally everyone who works for the health service, and also bringing it to the present day with COVID as well. Totally take my hat off to anyone in the health service and how those people who do those roles are so selfless, and they just go into action and they just do what needs to be done.
Yes.
And I learnt a lot of strength. So coming back to what shaped me in my 3rd point, it gave me so much strength to be there for mum, because she was in such an unavoidable, horrible, debilitating situation, that, and also with her depression as well. And you can imagine there was all sorts going on in her head, and she couldn't talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, how awful is that as well? Just not to be able to communicate. That each time I went in, I made sure I was strong for her.
Yes.
I wouldn't cry or anything. I would talk about positive things. And sometimes, obviously, I'm only human, it would get too much. So I'd have to leave the room. And then as soon as I'd leave the room, I'd go and have a really good cry and just, slump myself against the wall and get it out of my system. And I just remember this nurse following me. So coming back to 3 things that inspire you, coming out and saying, "You're so proud of your mum, aren't you?" And I was just in floods of tears. So it's just so amazing for those who work in the health service, to see how they, first of all, are with the patients who need their help, and then how they are with the loved ones.
Yes.
I mean, how they have that energy, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah. And you have a very altruistic intent yourself as well, in that you would keep the public face for the kind face for your mum, and then go and fall apart privately, because that was in the moments with her, that was about her, not about you, which is a very commendable way of operating.
And that took a lot to learn that, though. It was learning in that situation. I didn't naturally have it, so I had to learn it at that point of time. And then so we're on the list of 4 things that inspire you. And definitely, I would have to say, meeting new cultures. Mm-hmm. So going back to my role in the fashion world, I've worked in places like Bahrain, Turkey, Cambodia, Thailand, and India.
You're speaking from Qatar today as well, aren't you?
Yes, I am. So I have my home in Surrey, and then also we have home in Qatar as well. So I lived in India as well for 6 months. So I'm very much someone that's used to living out of a suitcase. and meeting new cultures. And, when it's just so wonderful to get used to how other people react to things.
Yeah.
And it's okay that we don't all react to something in the same way, but
Yep.
it's just learning to step back, listen to a situation, try and put yourself in that person's shoes. So I guess that comes from my empathetic side that I learned with mum, that I am a good listener as well, to understand how people respond in certain situations in a work scenario.
Yeah. Sounds like you've become very good at embracing a bigger picture. It's not just about you. There's other stories going on here that may be colliding, but there's a bigger picture which global travel has helped you with, it seems.
Definitely.
For a lens of perspective, I mean.
Definitely. And another angle that I look at that with, because you end up traveling quite a bit with certain jobs, you do get to a stage where you don't want to have too much in your case. So you actually start to dress in a way that less is more.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been able to bring into Denim Star as well, that less is more, and the whole concept of Denim Star.
So in a nutshell, all you need in your suitcase really is a pair of Denim Star UK socks, basically.
Definitely. Just a decent pair of jeans. And I have to say, still to this day, my favorite place to buy jeans is Amsterdam, because they do streetwear to a T. Because obviously with various jobs I've used to go to Amsterdam, London, New York, Paris, where I would go and check out all the competitors, do directional shots on denims. So I've always had denims in my life in one way or another. I could go on and on about it. So yeah, I would have a pair of jeans from Amsterdam in that suitcase with the pair of Denim Star socks, like you say.
Lovely jubbly. Very good. Okay.
So that's the 4 things that have shaped me. The 3 things that inspire me, I've already touched on the health service. And again, reverting back to people, but I am often inspired by stylists, and a stylist in particular is Iris Apfel. Do you know her?
Iris Attell, did you say?
I always get her surname wrong. It's Apfel.
Atfel.
Apfel.
Apfel. Okay.
Apfel.
Iris Apfel.
Yeah.
They're like the German.
Iris Apfel. Yes, I always get her surname wrong every time.
Sorry,
typical of me. But I love her because she's 99 years old.
Yeah.
And she is still completely rocking it as a fashion icon. So
have you told her that you like her, by the way?
Do you know, I think I need to tell her. I don't think I've actually ever had the guts to approach her. And
I think you need to get in touch with Jarvis. You need to get in touch with Jarvis Cocker. You need to say thank you to your brother. And then you also need to say a prayer for Violet and then go and say hi to Iris Apfel.
Absolutely. And it's just, so she was originally interior design, but she also became this fashion icon, and she mixes everything from the kitchen sink, but she makes it work. She's definitely has this wonderful, absolutely outlandish, colorful look on life, and just mixes it all together, and it just always looks wonderful. So she's definitely someone who's always inspired me. And something else that has always inspired me, just looking at my list to remind me, actually, because you know what it's like, you go on and on and on, don't you? That I covered. I think I kind of covered them, actually, but yes, go on.
I was going to say, whilst there's a sort of enigmatic pause, just to remind you, you're listening to the Brand Strand episode of the Good Listening To podcast with me, Chris Grimes, and we're speaking to Emma Brown from Denim Star UK. So now we're on to 2 things that never fail, squirrels, to get your attention.
Again, because of travelling, I'm always looking out for beautiful craft from other cultures. And one that I would really love to share with you, which is going back to the Mexican side in my life, is Mexican alejebres. And it's these characters which are either based on, nature, as in animals, or they are these mystical characters, and they're carved from wood. And they take a really long time, something ridiculous like 8 months, because they have to wait for the wood to cure.
Yeah.
They then have to carve it. They then cook it in the sun so that it dries out. They keep sandpapering it, and they have to keep filling it with wood putty that they make from just the wood to fill those cracks. And then they paint it in the most beautiful colors. And so something else that really inspires me is color.
Of course. Just say the name of the Mexican iconic piece again. Alhambra, did you say?
Alejebra.
Alejebra. Well, when we come to put the subtitles on this, I'm going to come to you to say, do you mind actually spelling that for yourself?
I will spell that for you for sure. And so what's amazing about color is how color can change your mood.
Yeah.
And it can support your mood, and also the meaning of color as well. So reverting back to the brand Denim Star, and based on the color indigo, indigo is about wisdom.
Oh, and by the way, indigo is just one color away from violet, who is your grandmother.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
That's blown my mind.
That is absolutely blown my mind.
That's the spectrum of your life. Well done.
Yes, that is amazing. Actually, how it all links together, and the empath side with the color as well. So,
and by the way, it's completely relatable that people decide what socks to wear based on the mood of the day. I love the fact that you can use your peripherals to think, okay, what's my mood today? So choosing a new color can add vibrancy. Color psychology, fascinating.
Yeah. That's absolutely so true. That's so true. And what's amazing, going back to the craft of the alejebra, is when they are making those colors to paint it, they actually make it from natural resources. It's also, modern ones are also done in acrylic paint, but going back to the original ones, which they still do today, but are just so expensive, is the paint is made from natural resources. So for example, I would need to really go back and double check it. But for example, they'll use bugs and charcoal. Yeah. I mean, it's not very kind that the bugs get crushed, but the bugs get crushed and then mixed with the charcoal that will make one color. And then I watch this done in front of me. Then they'll take a lime, squeeze some lime juice, mix it with the same thing. It then makes another color.
Yeah.
Then take salt, mix the salt, it then makes another color. So it's just absolutely mind-blowing for me how from nature we can create the complete colors of the rainbow. And definitely another thing that massively attracts me is rainbows, just the natural wonder of rainbows.
Which was the icon for health workers as well over pandemic part 1, which was the rainbow.
Yes.
There's so many connections. We love this. So your passion for colour is really clear, by the way. So good on you.
Yeah, and it is wonderful how it can completely change your mood. Do
you own any of these? Do you own any of these lovely Mexican iconic bits of craft?
I do actually, and I wish I could show you, but they're in my home in the UK.
In the fullness of time, send a photograph so we can attach it to the episode of the podcast as well of one of those. Say the word again of what they are. They're called Mexican
alejebres.
Good luck with that. Lovely. Okay, now I think we are at the point where in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, one quirky or unusual fact about you that we also couldn't possibly know about you, Emma Brown, until you tell us.
Right. There's many things again. Where do I start? but I will just select one thing, and it's something that's quite funny, because I think we're in a time when we actually need a bit of a giggle, really, don't we? And as you already heard from my St. Martin's interview, sometimes I might say something that's a little bit inappropriate. And one of my dad's favourite stories we used to love going around Henley and Marlow in the summer holiday. And when I was very young, I was a toddler, we would go blackberry picking. So, you know how you'd be driving along one of the sort of narrow country lanes and, oh, look, there's some blackberries. Let's go and pillage the bush, basically. And so we're doing this. And like I said, I'm just a toddler. And Dad said that coming down the road was this lovely, rather, you know, sort of twee lady on her horse, and very proud of her horse, roaming down this very narrow lane, and stopped to chat to my parents. And apparently I was hanging off my dad's leg, and I looked up to this lady and I said, "Your horse smells." And
you're the right height to find out.
Yeah, I was the right height to find out. And apparently she looked down to me and said, "And so do you."
I suppose technically you're both correct. It's all good.
It's all good. I guess, yeah, I was this smelly toddler. You know, I'd probably eaten something I shouldn't have. And
But there's sensory awareness there of smell and colour, which is just a lovely palette of what Emma Brown's here to bring as well. So
definitely.
Okay, now we're going to move away from the tree. So thank you for shaking your wonderful tree. And we're going to now be in the clearing still, and we're going to talk about alchemy and gold. So when you are at purpose and in flow, Emma Brown, what's the alchemy and the gold that you know that you are here to bring at your hand?
Well, what's for me with creating Denim Star, it has been my complete opportunity to draw on all of my experiences to create this brand. And something that I really want to show to younger fashion designers is that you can create something that's actually so simple, and, you know, take a really simple concept, but it's about totally putting your personality onto it.
Yes.
And by doing that, you know, because it is on everybody's lips now that sustainability is so important, and how can we go about this? We have all been part of an age where we've created these huge blue chip companies, and we've all been the small cogs to these companies. You know, so I freelanced for the likes of M&S, Tesco, used to work for Littlewoods. You know, these are huge companies. And of course, they create collections that covers every scenario in your life. So creating brands like Denim Star, my alchemy, my gold is showing that maybe the future should be more about smaller businesses and giving everybody the opportunity to have a piece of the pie, you know, because there is many opportunities out there. Yeah. And, you know, maybe we should learn to share more, and that perhaps it shouldn't be so much about these huge blue chip companies.
I so relate to that, about the autonomy of your own choices. And even this podcast has come about because I just thought I have an idea that I'd like to broadcast for myself, just for my own passion project. And so, you know, it's really important that we find our own expression, our own voice. And so, you know, ploughing your own furrow, if you like. I mean, even you know, I find that totally relatable, because even my comedy improvisation company is about a passion project, you know, going with what makes your heart sing, which I completely get with you. And I love the fact that you're talking about the legacy of how to encourage younger people to be able to have the courage to trust their own instincts. It's lovely.
Yeah, and absolutely trust your instinct, definitely. So yes, I'm not putting those big companies down because they play a role, you know, they serve a purpose, but I think this is something we can all think about moving forward.
It does make everything a bit more sort of dilute if it's on a massive monolithic scale. So in order to sort of stand out from the crowd, you know, you need to let your own jewels surface, if you like.
Definitely.
Wonderful. So thank you for the alchemy and gold. Now we've reached the point in the clearing where I'm going to award you with a bit of a cake, Emma Brown, which is another lovely metaphor, where we're going to invite you to put a cherry on the cake. And this is open to interpretation. It can be the best piece of advice you've ever been given. You told me that Violet, it does or doesn't have to be about her, but the best piece of advice you've ever been given. It could be advice to your younger self, or just a bit more existentially profound as well. You know, what would you like your legacy to be? How would you most like to be remembered? It's open to interpretation. So how would you like to give us your cherry on the cake, Emma Brown?
Oh, again, many cherries. Actually, I would like to do advice that I was given when I was younger and advice I would give to my younger self, which, so it was one of my many work experiences I did back when I was in Fashion University. And I was actually working in a wedding boutique. So that was very interesting, watching brides go through the motion of wedding jitters of getting married. So that was always quite exciting to see. And I was helping to make wedding dresses and bridesmaid dresses at that stage. And the lovely lady I was working with, I just remember her saying simply to me, Emma, advice I really want to give you is always trust your instinct. So I did touch on that a little bit a while ago, but I took it on back then. And I can definitely say over the years, I'm now in my 40s. It's so true. When you get that tingle or something in your shoulders or something in your upper arm or in your legs, trust that instinct, trust that tingle, because it's usually right.
Again, that's so relatable because of the comedy improvisational passion I have, where 9 times out of 10, when you teach it, 9 times out of 10, our instinct is correct. In fact, it's more often 99.9% of the time your instinct is correct. And I love your attuning to your own physicalization of instinct when you get the tingle, as you said. So trust your instincts. What a brilliant piece of advice to give us here on the podcast. Lovely.
Definitely. Thank you. And so advice I would give to little Emma, if I could travel back in time.
Smelly little Emma by the arse of the horse.
Smelly, completely. That if I could go back, so later in life, I've got more into meditation, how to control stress and when lots of things are going on and how to untangle all those thoughts in your head, because it does happen quite often for most of us, let's face it. That in that journey of learning about meditation, this wonderful sentence came up, which is simply, it will pass. Simple as that. So I would love to go back to little Emma to say, whatever stressful moment you're in, or if you're frustrated about something, scared about something, not sure, it will pass. That feeling, that kind of panic that you might initially feel on something, it will simply pass.
Beautiful simplicity. Should we wish to find out more about Emma Brown and Denim Star UK on the interweb, where should we look?
Definitely.
Your moment in the sunshine to amplify your brand.
Oh, here I am in my sunshine, being sun-kissed by the sun. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Denim Star _UK. And then my website is www.denimstar-uk.com. So that's where you can find me. And if you want to check out my podcast, which is Socks and Sandals and Other Scandals, you can get to know the Denim Star community.
Say the lovely name of that podcast once again. I love it.
So it's Socks and Sandals and Other Scandals.
Get you. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to a special Brand Strand episode of the Good Listening To podcast with me, Chris Grimes, and it's been my absolute joy, delight and pleasure to have been speaking to Emma Brown from Denim Star UK. Anything else you'd like to say?
Have a fabulous day and stay safe.
And good night.